Today, we're diving into a historical whodunit. But the crime scene isn't some dusty ruin. Nope, it's the dictionary itself. We're exploring a wild theory about a linguistic heist where changing just one single word might have completely rewritten history.
I mean, think about it. What if the history you think you know wasn't just recorded, but was deliberately edited over 1,000 years ago? A change so subtle, so genius, that it could hide in plain sight, right inside a common word.
And that's the story we're getting into today. It's about a grand linguistic heist, where some scholars believe that powerful thinkers use language itself as a tool to erase one version of the past and install their own. So how on earth could they have pulled that off?
Okay, so every investigation has to start at the crime scene. And in this case, we're not looking for a missing person. We're looking for an entire class of ancient rulers who seem to have just vanished from the official story.
So check this out. This is Exhibit A, the title Abu. Now, before the 8th century, inscriptions suggest it meant something big, something like sovereign protector or a regional ruler. But afterwards, its meaning seems to get shrunk, totally domesticated, to just mean father of. A public title of immense power becomes a private family term. The question is, what happened?
Well, that question leads us directly to the central theory trying to explain this bizarre shift. And it's got a name that sounds like it's straight out of a spy novel: the Baghdad Overwrite.
So what is it? The Baghdad Overwrite theory argues that the most brilliant scholars in 8th century Baghdad, which was, the intellectual capital of the new Abbasid Empire, they didn't just record history, they actively re-engineered it. They were standardizing the Arabic language, and in the process, they allegedly created a whole new official storyline.
But why? Why would they do that? Well, the theory suggests it all boils down to one thing: power. If you recast old, powerful elites as just simple tribal fathers instead of actual kings, you can neatly place them lower down in the new social hierarchy. It was a genius way to swap out a messy, complicated history full of powerful merchant empires with a much simpler origin story, one that just so happened to put all the power and legitimacy right into the hands of a single family.
Now, as you can imagine, this is a pretty radical theory, and it's being pieced together today by a group of modern-day investigators, academics who are basically reopening this centuries-old cold case. These folks are often called revisionists. And that doesn't mean they're just tweaking a few dates here and there. No, these are scholars who look at the most fundamental evidence, the stuff everyone else takes for granted, and they ask, hang on, what if we've been reading this all wrong?
Two of the big names here are Kamal Salibi, who really acts like the prosecuting attorney in this case, arguing it was all an intentional plot. And then you have Gunther Luling, who had this incredible phrase for it. He claimed ancient texts underwent a kind of semantic surgery to surgically remove any meanings that didn't fit the new official version of events.
So what are these investigators actually looking at? What's the hard evidence they're working with? Okay, this is where the case gets really fascinating. Let's dig into the exhibits.
This idea, drawn from the work of the scholar M. Bafakif, really cuts to the core of it. The shift from the ancient South Arabian alphabet called Musnad to the Arabic script we know today, well, it wasn't just swapping out some letters. It may have been a fundamental change in how power itself was defined and understood.
And here's a crystal clear example of how this could have worked. You have the term Abna, which probably meant something like the founders or the state builders. But with a tiny change, it was reinterpreted as Abna, which just means the sons. And boom, with that one subtle tweak, an entire ruling class of founders gets linguistically demoted to being just the children of a foreign power. It's a brilliant political move if it's true. Let's make this even more concrete. Take the Tabiads. Ancient inscriptions paint a picture of them as these incredibly powerful merchant emperors controlling global trade routes. But in the later histories written in Baghdad, that complex reality gets flattened out, and they become almost mythic figures, just kings of legend.
So all the evidence is on the table. What's the verdict? Was this really a deliberate, planned-out heist, or was something else going on? And this gets us to the absolute heart of the debate. Was this a premeditated intellectual crime? Or was it something a little less sinister? Just the result of scholars trying to interpret a past they didn't fully understand and accidentally filtering out the stuff that didn't make sense to them.
Let me be clear, there is absolutely no consensus here.
On one extreme, you've got our prosecutor, Kamal Salibi, who is basically 95% certain this was a deliberate heist. But on the other end, you have respected scholars like Robert Hoyland who are much more skeptical, seeing it as a case of major but probably unintentional cultural bias.
And if we zoom in, you can see all these different shades of belief. Salibi is way up there at a 9.5 out of 10, convinced it was an intentional remapping of history. Al-Azma is a little more moderate. He sees it as a state-driven project to homogenize the past. But then you go way down the scale to Hoyland, out of 4, who thinks it was more like cultural filtering. It's a whole spectrum of opinion, not a simple yes or no. But just when you think you've got a handle on the case, a new lead comes in. A totally different perspective that kind of challenges the entire investigation from the ground up.
And this new lead comes from scholars like Professor Ephraim Isaac. His approach is called indigenous skepticism, and it basically questions the whole setup. Instead of arguing about a history that was moved from one part of Arabia to another, he challenges older assumptions and argues that these cultures might have deep indigenous roots in Africa to begin with.
So here's the fundamental difference. The revisionists, like Salibi, they see a deliberate political theft of history, a crime. But Isaac, the indigenous skeptic, sees something else. He sees a long, cumulative history of cultural bias that's hidden the truth. For him, it's not a crime scene we need to investigate, it's an academic record that we need to correct.
See, for Isaac, the goal isn't to expose a dark conspiracy. It's about the recovery of a lost voice. He's arguing that instead of fighting over a history that was stolen and moved, maybe we should be looking for a history that was always there, in Africa, but has been overlooked and needs to finally be brought back into the story.
So, when you step back from it all, whether it was a heist, a bias, or just a colossal oversight, this whole affair leaves us with one kind of haunting question. If the meaning of a single word has the power to hide entire dynasties and totally reshape our understanding of the past, what else are we misreading right now?